Does Mexico want you? Well, that's a complicated question, and the answer is both yes and no. Let me explain. The financial requirements have gone up every year. As an example, when Paulette and I first moved to Mexico in 2019, the financial requirements for temporary residency was about $2,400. And that is based on the multiplier of the Mexican minimum wage, which has gone up every year. It started out at about 103 pesos per day when we came here in 2019, and it's currently at 315 pesos per day. And now, as you can imagine, since the financial requirements are based on a Mexican minimum wage, they have actually gone up quite a bit. They've gone up about 2.5 times since we moved here, but with the implementation of UMA as a standard for figuring out what the financial requirements were or are, that is actually lowered a little bit. So now the financial requirements are about $4,400 US a month for temporary residency. Now keep in mind, that'll change a little bit because of the fluctuation in the peso to dollar exchange rate. This is now based on UMA, which stands for Unidad Medida de Actualizaciones. I had to look at my paper because I couldn't read it very well. And this is a measurement that Mexico uses to figure out fines and taxes and fees and things of that nature. It's not a benefit of any way, it's just a way that they use to sort of regulate things financially here in Mexico. Now, the raise in the minimum wage has actually been very good for Mexico. When Paulette and I first came here in 2019, the poverty rate was at about 42%. With the raises in the Mexican minimum wage, got a little tongue-tied there, the rate is now at about 29%, which still isn't good, but it is getting better. As an example, the poverty rate in the U.S. is about 10%, but that's measured on different metrics. Now, the poverty rate in Mexico isn't solely based on household income or anything like that. It's just a measurement of people's abilities to buy standard things, food, groceries, rent, stuff like that. But of course, if you think about it, wages are, income is really tied into that piece of it, but it's just a measurement that they use. And it increases every year, roughly by about what the rate of inflation increases. The very important thing is it's really helping the underprivileged here in Mexico get the things they need to survive and just get by on day to day. Last year, about 47 million people visited Mexico. They contributed about $5 billion worth to the economy, and they created about 5 million jobs just involved with the tourism industry. Now, both the tourism industry accounts for about 8% of Mexico's GDP, and the 5 million people that are employed through tourism actually equates for about 8% of Mexico's total employment population. About 1.2 million immigrants live in Mexico. However, we account for about 7% of the GDP. 1.2 million immigrants in Mexico represents about 1% of the population. But since we account for about 7% of the GDP, obviously we're spending more, we buy more things, and we pay more for things. One of those things is rent, which is really creating some issues because people are being forced out of the areas in which they live for higher rents. Now, in places like Mexico City, they do have rent control. It says basically landlords can only raise the rent by the percent of inflation from the year before. However, if they don't report their renting to the Mexican government, or they just decide they want to get more rent, they kick the renters out, they raise the rent, and hopefully hope to rent to an immigrant or something like that. And then there's the Airbnb factor too, which they also kick people out, and then they can charge whatever they want for Airbnbs. However, this is creating some real issues, especially in Mexico City, with protesters protesting against gentrification and things like that. And like I said, people are being forced out of their homes, their neighborhoods, and this is creating some issues where people actually go out and protest against gentrification. So in some areas it is an issue, so just be aware of that. Now, Paulette and I don't see a lot of that here in where we live in San Luis Potosi. There isn't a large immigrant population. And so that was one of our things, is that we wanted to be in an area where our being here wouldn't greatly affect the economy in any way. However, I mean, we do get some negative backlash because we do have a YouTube channel, and that's where it comes from. However, in our day-to-day lives, people are very nice and very kind to us, and we appreciate that. Keep in mind that most of the landlords here are Mexican. However, there's a percentage of the Mexican population that sees the immigration as the root cause of the problem. And so that's what they demonstrate against. Here's the thing that Mexico doesn't want you to do. They don't want you to change the culture, which at times can be frustrating. The Mexican culture in general is a beautiful thing, but the culture here is far more laid back than in the U.S. Like, you know, if an example is workers doing work at your house, if they say they'll be back mañana, mañana doesn't necessarily mean tomorrow or next week or even next month, which can be frustrating for people, but that's something that you're just going to have to get used to. It can be more difficult for people with a type A personality because, as I've said before, Mexico is not a type A country, so just be aware of that. I used to think that Mexico would level off the financial requirements and base the raising on the financial requirements based on, say, the inflation rate or something like that. But truthfully, I don't see that happening. I think what the government is now starting to look for with higher minimum qualifications is people coming here that have more money can afford more things because, as I've stated, we do typically buy more things and we pay more for more things, which helps with the GDP, and it helps with creating jobs and things of that nature. But again, like I said, the issue is rents going up and making them unaffordable for Mexicans in certain areas. So that's why I say that, yes, Mexico wants you, but there's a certain segment of the population that does not want you. Let us know your thoughts. And as always, what she did. Oh wait, she's not here.